I want to demonstrate PhoneGap build and how simple it is to create applications for Apple, that's iOS, whether that's an iPhone or iPad, Android, phones and tablets, BlackBerry, Palm, Windows 7, all these different devices you can build, or PhoneGap build will build native applications for those devices from your JavaScript, your CSS and HTML files. It's that simple. Your files go in one end and out the other end you'll find your applications coming out. One of the nicest things about PhoneGap build is the fact that it's free. It's free if you're developing applications for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. It's got my credentials. You'll probably see here I've made a few apps, but we're not going to focus on that. What we're going to do today is build a brand new application. So if I go to something like this folder dev on my machine, which you can see here, it's got nothing in it at the moment. I'm going to make a new directory called stupid, well, let's just call it silly simple. Over here in Windows, if you're more comfortable with that, there's a folder called silly simple. This is where we're going to put the files for the application. One of the first files we'll need to make is the index file, which is effectively your application, and then I'm going to make a folder and put the JavaScript files into that. This is going to be a Git repository, and that's one of the things that PhoneGap build does or can do. It can build your application from a GitHub repository. If you don't know what GitHub is, maybe now is the time to stop or pause this and go into find out what Git is all about. So I'm just going to initialize this as a Git repository. And I'm going to create a new file, a new HTML file. We're going to keep this really simple. Like I said, the focus is not on this application or the style or the layout or anything of this. It's all about the building of it. So what does this look like, or how do we create an application with HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So silly simple is the title of this application. To my C drive dev silly simple, I'm going to call it index.html, even without that comma. Right, so that's all I have at the moment. Let's put a body to the page. And what I'm going to do for this very, very simple application is have a button that people press. And that's going to be called silly, because it is pretty damn silly. And do it. If anyone has seen the movie Starsky and Hutch, that's the remake, the more modern one, you'll understand the joke when I say do it, do it, do it. So we're going to have that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the results into a div that's below that. I'll need to identify both of these elements, because one I want to react on and the other I want to update. So we'll just put the results in there. Now, nothing's going to happen when I load this page. If I load the page, do it does nothing. And that's exactly what I would expect it to do at this point in time. I'm going to be putting some script in here. And what I'm going to do here, done in this script, is I will hook up the elements on the page in terms of the click event for the do it button and how I want to update that result. Now there are a couple of things that I want to do. One thing I'm going to be doing is using a library called Zepto. So I'm going to have a script element in here. Yeah, that was right. I like to put my source code into a folder, so I'm going to call it JS. That'll be my JS folder. So in here I'll make a new folder. I could right click and create the folder that way, but I just find it so much easier to go make directory JS and bing, it's done. That's the way I like it to be. Now I need to go download Zepto. I'm going to download that from a website called zeptojs.com. And at the bottom of the page, I should find a link to download Zepto, which is so small it loads in next to no time at all. And what I'm going to do is unzip those files to this folder here. So there we go. I've unzipped the Zepto MS or minified JavaScript. And now what I want to do is add that to my source file here. So if I just take that name, make sure I get it right, because there have been a few times when I've accidentally typed something incorrectly and it doesn't work, which is most frustrating. Now, as most people know, JavaScript should be at the bottom of the page, which is where I'm putting it now. CSS, if I had any, would be in the head as far as I'm concerned, but I've just got this Zepto min, which I'm putting down here. The reason I'm using Zepto is it's very much like jQuery. So it's a syntax that a lot of people are very familiar with, but it's a lot smaller than jQuery. And since I'm going to be running this application on a mobile, I'm not going to need jQuery's ability to run on lots of different browsers, because I know that the target browser for this application is going to be the Android browser. So I'm just going to, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hook up with the silly button, and I'm going to handle the click event on that. Now, if anyone's done jQuery, this is going to be super simple. So in the click, I'm going to make a new function, just an anonymous function. I'm ignoring the parameters. And what I'm going to do here is I want to use a module, just because I think it's good design. Let's call it silly, if I can spell. Silly.doit. Right? Now, I could just call silly.doit, and silly would then have to know that I've got a results element, but I think that's ugly. You're then mixing your UI with your functionality. So I'm going to pass in an object. Anybody spot the obvious mistake? It's an ID. I'm going to pass in an object that's found by searching for the identifier results. Now that may not make very much sense yet, but it will shortly. I think we'll probably, because we're going to be adding or updating the results, we might want another button in here, and let's call it clear. That clears the content of the results. It'll be very much the same sort of scaffolding for button handling, but in this time I'm going to handle the clear click event, and what I'm going to do here is once again grab the results, but I'm going to set the HTML of the results to nothing, which will clear out anything that's in there. Now we don't have a silly, we don't have this module yet, so I'm going to make one. So in my JavaScript file, I'm going to make silly.js, and that'll be a new file. So I'm going to make var silly, which is my module, a function which takes a module, and this will invoke with either silly itself, or if it's null, we'll give it a new object that it can use. So that then ends this function, this definition. And in here we will return silly, so that silly is then defined. No, not silly, module. And now we can go about extending silly. Extend this module. Do it, I believe, is what the function's called. Yes, do it. And do it is a function which takes a result object, and we're going to do something incredibly simple here. We're literally going to say result object dot prepend, and the prepend function is something we get from Zepto, and the reason for that is we're passing in a Zepto object here, which could, for all intents and purposes, be a jQuery object that we're passing in. So we're going to and there's a prepend function on that, and we'll prepend a let's make it really simple. Let's just prepend the date onto that, and just to keep it on new line, we'll break after that, after putting that date in. So if I now save this to into the JavaScript folder as silly, I think it was, .js. Let's just check that. Yes, it's called silly.js. I should now be able to reload that page. I'm done with Zepto, or downloading it, so thank you very much. If I reload this page, if I click do it, nothing's happening. There's no method do it. Well, I've obviously goofed up there. Let's see where I've gone wrong. Var silly. Let's just check that we do actually have something called silly. We do. Ah, well, that's it. Capital T. Oh dear, when will I ever learn, huh? Lowercase t, and that should solve that. So let's just reload the page. Do it. Okay. So we've got an application now functioning, do it, and clear should clear, which it does. It is silly simple. That's exactly the idea of this application, is that we don't focus too much on my accidental case mistake. We focus purely on the fact that we have an application that's written with HTML here, a little bit of JavaScript to hook up to a module that does some JavaScript. This thing that puts the date onto an element could be doing something a lot more complicated. But that's the focus of this, and we can test it locally. Now what I've done so far is I've done a git init. So in this folder where the index file and the JS or the JavaScript files are, is actually a Git repository, and I can see that if I go up one folder because it's got Git there. So what I'm going to do is add all the files that I've added so far. There's a warning about line feeds and Zepto. There's nothing we need to worry about at the moment. I'm also going to commit everything with one simple message. It's silly, really. And now I can see that I've added 3 files. So that's great. What I'm going to do now is go to GitHub and create a new repository. So if I go here, new repository, let's call this silly simple. I think that's what we called it, is it? Yeah, we did. And the description is too simple for words. Anyone can see it. We're going to make this a public repository because that makes it free. Now, it's telling me here how to commit and everything, and it's telling me also how to add a remote origin, which is something I need to do on my repository here, is I need to add the remote origin for this repository. Now that I've done that, I can push to the origin. And once that's finished, I should see the code. There we have it. There's my index HTML. There's the comment. It's silly ready for my check-in comment. I've got the JavaScript. I've got Zepto and my silly JavaScript. It's that simple. We now have the files that we had locally in GitHub. We've pushed them. Now we can go to the PhoneGap build, and we're going to create a new application here. Silly simple. I'm going to pull the source from a GitHub repository. Now you'll notice that in GitHub we've got addresses here. We want the HTTP version, but this version that they give us here is HTTPS, and it's got my address in front of github.com before it gives me the rest of it. Let me just try and get to the end of that. then my username and the application name. But PhoneGap Build wants a non-secure and without my username. So insecure, no username, but then the rest of it is the same. So first thing I'll do is take off the S, take off my username at GitHub. So now it's just http github.com, my username and the application name, or the repository really, and I'll create that. Now one of the nice things about PhoneGap Build is it can be that simple. It hasn't built iOS yet because it's not going to. I don't have a signing key for Apple applications. PhoneGap Build allows me to control far more of the application than what I've done so far. I've given it no idea as to how to control the permissions I want on the phone or the device, what my application's icon is, any splash screen. There are all sorts of things that I could have done with this application that I haven't for simplicity's sake. So at the moment we're going to keep this simple. Now you see these things are queued. It doesn't refresh itself, so I'm going to hit F5, and by this stage, there you go. It's already built the Android, WebOS, and Symbian. BlackBerry is still queued. So it's built these applications for me already. And right now, I can go install this application on my phone, which is what I'm going to do now. I'll show you a screenshot of my phone. This is a live, but this is only sampling, so you won't get a very responsive update from it. So I'm going to go ahead and use Google Goggles to get a download of this application. So by starting Google Goggles, if I point this at the QR code on the screen, as soon as it, whoa, that's a terrible picture. But it still recognizes it as a barcode, and I can click on that link and it will go to PhoneGap to go download the application that's just been built. PhoneGap actually redirects to Amazon's cloud storage where my application is. And if I now leave Google Goggles, I'll see that the Silly Simple debug has been downloaded. If I click on the APK, it prompts me to install that application. I'm going to say yes, I do want to install it, and let it install. It doesn't take too long. As soon as it's installed, I'm actually going to open it straight away. You see a Silly Simple title, which is where the splash screen would now be shown if I had one. And now we see the application, very much like we saw on the screen. If I click the Do It button, I can see that it's adding the time in there as I click it. Clears it as expected. If I change that into landscape mode, I did it again, I did it the wrong way around. You see the application has rearranged itself and fits inside the screen. If I just keep do it a few times, I think if I tap too quickly, it seems to recognize it as a double tap instead of a tap. We can see I can actually scroll the application and I can clear. So that shows you that the application I've built with PhoneGap Build has been able to install and run on this thing. But just to demonstrate how much it looks like an application, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get Silly Simple, and I'm going to put it on my phone screen so I can launch it directly from there. Imagine if this thing looked a little bit different, didn't look like a web page so much, it would behave very much like a normal application. So at this point, I think it would be a good idea to recap what we've done. We created an index or an HTML page. We added some JavaScript to create some functionality for that page. We tested it locally before we did anything online. We then uploaded that application, all of the files for it, to a GitHub repository, and we then used PhoneGap Build to add a new application and have PhoneGap build that application. We downloaded the application using the QR code for the phone or the device that we want to run the application on. We could also use the download link to download the file that we need and copy that directly to the device. So you can take this offline. You don't need to be online to install the application. If you for some reason wanted to download this APK, take it with you when you went away for the weekend and try the application somewhere. Git as a source control tool is free. GitHub is free for public repositories. PhoneGap build is free for public applications.